Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Daily Crypto Byte. Today is Wednesday, August 25th, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. CJ Reichel, who adjusts his camera as we start this show. CJ, how are you doing today?
Doing good, Monty. Just a couple minor technical adjustments here before we get going into the analysis. A lot of interesting news. People are fired up about a lot of Bitcoin exchange inflows. In other words, Bitcoin's coming back onto exchanges as we see price increases. That kind of hints at profit taking. We're going to talk about that, break it down, and more. How are you doing today, Monty?
Doing good. Wednesdays are always a good day. We got our member webinar coming up at 11:30 Central. So you guys can ask us any questions about any assets. We'll be happy to do TA during that hour. But I agree, CJ, we're seeing some really interesting metrics. I saw some people in the chat, Brad Smith, Anthony Foti, talking about those exchange inflows and what that means for Bitcoin. So we'll definitely dive into that. Like, is this, legitimate profit taking? Is this a sign of, a loss in conviction in, the possible performance of crypto? Or is it just, strategic de-risking? We'll dive into that because I think there's some Glassnode data that kind of helps to answer that question. You're muted.
I'll go ahead and pull that data up right now, if you don't mind.
Awesome.
Okay, so we don't see the massive spike in inflows because this data is about delayed by just 10 hours or something of that sort. But it doesn't matter for the overall point that I want to make. And that is that typically when we see outflows from exchanges, it happens much more gradually. And so that typically is an indication of like people getting more bullish, trying to accumulate and put Bitcoin away longer time for the longer term because they're more bullish. However, it doesn't really work that way when it comes to inflows. When we see like massive spikes of inflows, it's usually a sign of capitulation, or it happens very quickly in line with capitulation. So when we hear a lot of individuals saying, this is the largest inflows spike that we've seen since Black Thursday back here when we fell 40%. Well, if we actually look at Black Thursday, all of those inflows, they came through after price dropped in the sense that it's kind of a lagging metric. And if you think about this from a larger player, there's no point of transferring $2 billion worth of Bitcoin to an exchange if it's completely transparent and people can see that you're doing that. Because if they do see it, they'll just front run you and sell and take profit right now. But I think we're already seeing a lot of profit taking and a potential to hold some key support levels here. But overall, I'm interested to hear about your interpretation as well.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you, CJ. And I think there's some metrics we can look to as well, not just at exchange inflows, but, other metrics that kind of contextualize what those inflows mean. And one of them was one I talked about yesterday on Trade the Chain, but that is the total supply held by long-term holders. When you see exchange inflows in a very bearish sense, you'd expect that the, old hands are selling to the newer hands. But what we're seeing here, is a very steady accumulation from the, long-term holders. The peak amount held was 12.6 million BTC. We quickly, came back to that after they distributed their Bitcoin, reaccumulated, and are continuing to accumulate now. So I think that, it's natural we're seeing some, de-risking after a nice run-up following a month of, somewhat shaky price action. Yeah, people are going to need to sell, particularly miners, that need to sell in order to pay for some overhead costs. So this is an instance, and it's actually mentioned in this, Glassnode insight. This adds further weight to the argument that old hand spending observed this week is likely of low coin volume and strategic de-risking rather than a loss of conviction and a mass exit. And I'm definitely inclined to agree. One other metric that kind of supports this fact is one I like to reference as well, and that's Bitcoin open interest. For me, this is a great indication of whether or not the institutions are still bullish on Bitcoin for the short to medium term. And as you can see with this increase in open interest, it's still building steadily over the past couple of weeks, and I expect this to continue to climb. So yeah, it seems to me like just de-risking. And the last point I'll make as well, this is kind of, I would say this is the weakest point, but the crypto related equities as well, still holding up somewhat, okay. You'd expect those to sell off more if this really was a sort of flip in sentiment and people, taking profit because of a loss of conviction rather than, taking profit as a result of just strategic de-risking. So interesting stuff, but I don't think it's necessarily as bearish as everyone is making it out to be.
Agreed. With that being said, why don't we get into the actual technicals of the charts? Because I do think there are some bearish signals coming from the shorter term time frames, specifically on the 4-hour. So you'll see this on the daily too. I just think it's a little bit clearer on the 4-hour and more pronounced. So, on our entire way up, we talked about divergences, how price can go up, and when we see higher highs, and when we see them in, bearish divergence, when we're seeing lower highs on the RSI, typically that means a slowdown of bullish momentum and that we will likely give some back to the markets. That's typically what we see when we get massive divergences like that, especially when we have 3 touch points, both being on higher highs and then on lower highs on the RSI 4-hour. So I think that is a little bit notable and something to consider here as we may go into a little bit of profit-taking phase. If we go to the daily chart, I think that one of the key levels that we haven't really held is right here, this repeated level at about 47.8. And, we had held that level previously on, this like wave structure of 3 waves up. We held this when we back tested here. We held here when we initially back tested here as well, but it's not holding completely. So that means what are our downside risks, or what are our downside targets for potential accumulation or, getting back in a potential bull trade? Well, if we see kind of a regression to the moving average here, which I think we could, and it will likely come up to about 45, 46K. A lot of order book depth at that level and a lot of macro whale accumulation at the 45K level too as well. So I think that's solid support. If we are to see a bullish engulfing candle off of that level, say in the next couple of days, then I would definitely look to re-enter. I think this trend is still very strong. Nonetheless, we've gone up about 100% in the last month, and taking some profit taking here, potentially back to 45K, doesn't seem too far out of the realm of possibility to me.
Yeah, it is starting to look, somewhat likely, CJ. It just seems like we got, very overextended from our moving averages. We moved up quick, and now we're kind of experiencing the profit taking that you get along with that as well. I want to take a look at ETH because ETH is kind of in a, a similar position to Bitcoin here. I think there are a lot of similarities. Let me just pull up this 4-hour chart here. Yeah, so looking at the 4-hour chart, I think that this is I was watching to see if it would hold this 20-period SMA on the 4-hour chart, because during this uptrend, it actually had been holding this very well on the 4-hour. There were some people in our community that had been pointing out this sort of upward trending channel. I believe Jon Najarian was one of them, and it had held up very well since all the way back here, in July 20th or so. But now we're, kind of breaking that, it seems like. The next big test for ETH, in my opinion, is going to be right here at 3K. Last time we dipped just below 3K, but we saw a tremendous amount of buy orders step in just below this, psychologically critical level and send price right back up to the 3,300 level. So, if this bearish price action continues, I wouldn't be too surprised if we retested 3K and get a subsequent bounce similar to what we did here, and even, right here. So this is going to be a big test for ETH. If this level is broken and we don't necessarily get a bounce, it might mean that some of the buy pressure that we saw here, and here is a bit exhausted. So definitely be watching ETH closely, because not only do I think it's going to be, this level is going to be an important crossroads for ETH, but I think it could dictate a lot of the price action in the altcoin market for, the remainder of this week as well.
Yeah, so I don't have a Doge of the day today per se, but I do have some assets that I do want to highlight and recognize a particular pattern that I think is happening with a lot of alts. Mind if I jump into that?
Yeah, go ahead. And then I do want to get to ADA, because I see we got Gurneet, Dan, and Bill asking about ADA in the chat.
Yeah, we'll get to ADA. I actually have a whole little segment here dedicated to ADA, but so before we get to ADA, I want to start by highlighting some of these like cup and handle patterns, or potential cup and handle patterns that I think are forming with a lot of these assets that have really performed well. Typically what we see after, or when we get the construction of like a cup and handle pattern, obviously you have kind of a rounding bottom. And I think a lot of assets are showing that rounding bottom right now. And then, we have a particular neckline with previous resistance, which Luna, for instance, was able to break above. Not saying we have to go all the way back to this level to form the actual like cup and then handle part where we push higher. But I'm just saying, if the broader market is to correct and Bitcoin is to go down to say 46 or 45K, which I think could be likely here in the near term, a lot of these alts will likely give back as well, and will go back and touch previous areas of resistance. Hopefully now will form support and will be a nice launch pad for higher prices going into, potentially September or early into October and November. But Luna is one of those that might be forming one of those quasi cup and handles that I'd watch for. Also Serum, anything with like this rounding bottom, blow off top a little bit, and then obviously coming back down. This one looks like there might be a good target here with the 20 smooth moving average, but we will see on that one. FTX token, or FTT ticker symbol, same thing there, looking like kind of a quasi cup and handle. And I think, if you look at a lot of altcoins, you will find that very similar pattern. And so when we see a bounce or a bullish engulfing candle off of one of these levels, during the downward part of the handle, I'm going to look to enter on that, because if you take that, interim price projection and this distance and then extrapolate it to the breakout point, it gives some pretty high price targets for a lot of these particular crypto assets that are forming this rounding bottom. So that's just something that I would watch for, and something that we may see if we are to get like a correction in the ecosystem as a whole. But onto ADA, this kind of fits that narrative as well. And I'm curious where the Williams alligator levels are. So let me go ahead and add that quickly. So yeah, during our uptrend, we've always used, I shouldn't say always, but we've used many times this outer band being the outer Williams alligator as support coming down. That level's at about 240, 230 right now. I do think ADA is going to come off a little bit here. And I think it's setting up for potential cup and handle as well. Already kind of did, actually, as we can see, it regressed here and then shot up even higher. So I wouldn't be looking to enter ADA right now. I think we will likely see a little negative price action here, maybe at least for the end of the day. But those are my views on ADA. Before I pass back to Monty, I just want to say, if we are to get kind of a correction here with Bitcoin in the next couple of days, there's been so much hype around ADA. And, when you look at utility chains and their ecosystems, whether it's, Binance Chain, Ethereum, or Solana, I like to look at some of the early projects for opportunities before they actually like launch and when they come and start to launch. So I really like this Cardano ecosystem map. You can find this on, I think it was 98 Coin Analysis on Twitter. But you have this entire ecosystem of opportunities that is pretty much being built on Cardano, or is in the process of being built on Cardano. And out of all of these particular factions, you can look in the NFTs, but I think that Cardano is, or excuse me, I think Ethereum has taken a lot of the market share and control of the NFT space as of now. But when opportunities come, I think every utility chain needs a primary DEX. You know, on Ethereum, this is Uniswap. On Binance Chain, this is PancakeSwap. And you know, funny enough, we have SundaySwap slowly emerging as the largest DEX and first and most prominent DEX on Cardano. So I will watch that one for user growth. You know, we laughed when we saw Sushi and PancakeSwap because they had, you know, funny names, but nonetheless, I think these category of assets here for Cardano in the coming months, I think there's going to be a correction in the short term. I think people will take profit after this parabolic run, but from a larger viewpoint, I think those are going to be some good opportunities coming back once the market does pretend to rebound. But any thoughts on ADA, Monty?
I mean, yeah, first and foremost, that, those opportunities you just mentioned, that gets me excited. Like, it's not very often you get, you know, uh, people always, especially crypto traders, there's this mentality of like, oh, I wish I was here 2 years ago. Now you're here for the beginning of something that could potentially be very big. I think the opportunity is tremendous, and your Dex point, is spot on. Those have been some of the best performers, especially early on, with these utility chains. The one thing I would say about Cardano is, I think the 4-hour chart right now is actually looking somewhat interesting. I'm just going to quickly pull that up. And yeah, CJ, you talked about that sort of cup and handle pattern in this, particular dip right here. It was a similar thing to that level of 3K at ETH. When we broke below this $2 level, we just saw a lot of buy pressure step in. Also below this 20-period smooth moving average, which during this trend has been acting as very, nice support. We're now retesting this level again. So, I think those levels that you pointed out on the, daily time frame, CJ, definitely could come true. And I think the first indication of that will be whether or not this 20-period smooth moving average holds up for Cardano. So it's testing it right now. We kind of got to bounce off it in the last 4 hours. And, it might not break this. There's still very bullish sentiment around Cardano. They just opened up to the Asian audience. So now, Asian exchanges have the ability to trade Cardano as well. So, I think there is, some real potential for this thing to continue running, but definitely watch this 20-period smooth moving average as an indication of either a breakdown or a bounce and a continue to climb higher.
Good stuff. Well said. I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities here in the coming months. I just think in the short term, we're hitting a little roadblock resistance at 50K. A lot of order book depth at that level as well. I think whales are, the ones who accumulated kind of towards 30K and towards the bottom, and have been over up 100% in the last month, are definitely going to take some profit here in the short term. But then I think we're going to still continue to rally. But I guess that's kind of just my overall takeaway for the show today. But no doges in the short terms.
I do have a question for you, CJ. I would like to just quickly pose here, if I can. Hold on. Actually, it's not letting me share this for some reason. But my question is, yesterday in chat we had some people, Mark Lowenberg and Bob Dittrich, talking about the fact that historically September has been a month in which crypto in general has not performed well. Any thoughts on this? Crypto has been very cyclical. Do you expect underperformance in September like we've seen, consistently the last 3-4 years?
Seasonality is always an interesting thing. I almost think that the seasonality in the U.S. equity market is going to be more important an influence on crypto. There we go. Thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so you can see September has been a pretty rough month throughout Bitcoin's history, but I don't think it's fair to compare every single year with Bitcoin's monthly returns in seasonality. I think we always talk about stock to flow, and I think that dictates seasonality a lot more because it shows how far we are through particular halving cycles, and it outlays the supply and demand dynamics within the market and allows us to model scarcity. So the equivalent of where we are in these halving cycles, if we are to compare it to our current year being 2021, then the only years that I think are fair to compare it to are 2013 and 2017, because those years are basically towards the end of the halving cycles, right? We had a halving cycle in 2020 or in 2012, 2016, and then 2020. And then we typically feel the scarcity shock of that bull market a year afterwards. And so that's why we've had a bull market in 2020 to 2021. It's kind of why we had a bull market in 2016 and 2017, and so on and so forth. So I think we have to look to 2017 and 2013 as comparisons.
Yeah, completely agreed. Not everything, you can't compare it all, one to one. And I think that, what is definitely worth noting is the performance in the months of October, November, and December. And to your point, CJ, this is typically when we have the largest divergence from the stock to flow model. So it's got like some catching up to do. And I think that does have to do with the fact that in September we do see, somewhat negative price action. And I think your first point about the seasonality of the traditional markets, is really the kind of driving factor here. But yeah, I mean, looking at this chart, obviously this isn't up to date here. We'd have to go ahead and June would be a red month. July would be a red month. August would be a green month. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think that, given where we're at, in terms of the stock to flow model, that that September necessarily has to be a red month. But that being said, if we did trade flat in September, the stock to flow model would still be valid because we could put up numbers like this, in the last 3 months and bring us to parity with that model. So interesting stuff. Appreciate the members sharing that in chat. But yeah, CJ, Bill says, tell those construction guys to go ahead and chill for a minute. You've been plagued by that construction for the last week. I feel for you.
But enough about my feelings. But yeah, I think it's only fair to, or I think the more important point to take from that seasonality chart is what happens, November, December, January, because that's when we've really seen historical fireworks, and I'm really excited for the fall and winter months. But yeah, with that being said, I want to say thank you to Voyager. Excited for the Voyager loyalty program to launch here at the start of September with VGX. But I'm going to let Monty do the outro and stop.
CJ, Chris says you need to move to the couch and do a couple chill episodes, but I can attest to the fact
it's worse. It's worse out in the living room. Sorry.
We're setting up today, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to go do today's episode by the couch. And he gets over there. He's like, it's worse over here. So yeah, hopefully soon, CJ, you'll just be able to do Bill's strategy here. Just buy out the unit above you. Total baller move. But yes, I will hit the plugs real quick. Thank you very much to Voyager for sponsoring this show. Head over there. You can trade 60 plus assets commission free at investvoyager.com. They got some of the most competitive interest rates in the business. Check out 10% on USDC and up to 12% on DOT. So definitely head over there and check them out. And if you do, use the code Rebel25 for $25 free in Bitcoin when you sign up. And of course, you can try the crypto trading room for just $1 at marketrebellion.com/try crypto. Like I mentioned earlier, we have a member webinar today, an hour-long member webinar where we answer all your questions, any questions on any assets, crypto-related equities or crypto tickers. We take the time and do TA and answer your questions. So that's something you'd have access to if you sign up for just $1 for the first month, and you can cancel at any time. But that's about all we got for today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you again tomorrow. Take care.